Though her longtime love affair with Clint Eastwood largely defined Sondra Locke's public persona, she was a creative force who struggled in a paramour's considerable shadow her entire life. An actress and indie film pioneer, Locke died in 2018 at 74 years old. This is her untold story. Sondra Locke burst onto the Hollywood scene in her first feature film by earning both an Academy Award and Golden Globe nomination for her portrayal as teenage Mick Kelly opposite Alan Arkin in 1968's The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Based on Carson McCullers' acclaimed novel of the same name, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter stars Arkin as a deaf mute who rents a room in a small Georgia town to be close to his institutionalized friend. Once there, he begins to change the lives of all those around him, including a young girl played by Locke, who lives in the boarding house. Locke said in an interview, "I dreamed of being an actress in films, and then one day WB held a nationwide talent search for an unknown actress to star in The Heart as a Lonely Hunter, and I was swept away from a small town in Tennessee to Hollywood and an Oscar nomination." Sondra Locke worked with Clint Eastwood for the first time in 1975, during the making of the Civil War revenge thriller The Outlaw Josie Wales. Shortly afterward, Locke and Eastwood, who was married to Maggie Johnson at the time, began an affair that would last until 1989.
There's one too many women in your life.
The couple would go on to make 5 more films together with Warner Brothers: The Gauntlet, Every Which Way But Loose, Bronco Billy, Any Which Way You Can, and Sudden Impact, until creative and personal differences drove them apart. When Sondra Locke made her directorial debut with 1986's Rat Boy, her relationship with Clint Eastwood started to unravel. Locke told the LA Times in a 1996 interview, "I was beginning to develop, maybe a little bit too much, and it changed the dynamics. He was daddy, you know, and I guess that was no longer the case. When you're a director, the job itself forces you to take charge." Reflecting on her experience in an interview with Coming Soon, Locke admitted that Eastwood seemed to be against her decision to direct. In fact, Eastwood's Malpaso company produced Rat Boy through his deal with Warner Brothers, despite objections from Locke. So not only did he put his name on it, but then also, he felt that he was in a position to tell me what to do all the time.
Well, I hate to argue with you, but...
Don't argue with me. That's the only way we're doing it. I teach you all you need to know, and then you go off and you make $1 million.
Sondra Locke's sophomore directorial effort, 1990's Impulse, was a psychological cop thriller starring Teresa Russell. Clint Eastwood was not involved, and according to Locke, quote, "That's really when it started to unravel." Per Locke's autobiography, she alleged that Eastwood attempted to sabotage the film from the start. She claims Eastwood tried to make her miss production meetings, and whenever producer and longtime Eastwood collaborator Al Ruddy would call to discuss the project, Eastwood hopped on the piano, quote, "banging out Scott Joplin tunes as loudly as he could." Tensions rose to a boiling point when, per the LA Times, Eastwood changed the locks of their Bel Air home and called a moving company to pack up and store her clothes while she was away directing.
Get off my lawn.
Sondra Locke filed a lawsuit to return to the home, but according to the Los Angeles Times, she later settled for the home Eastwood had bought her husband, about $500,000, and a 3-year, $1.5 million development deal at Warner Brothers. When the Warner's deal turned out to be an alleged ruse, Locke sued the studio. She also sued Eastwood in 1994, after discovering that he'd allegedly bankrolled the development deal with Warner Brothers, and then made sure that none of her film pictures were approved. The suit against Warner Brothers was dismissed, but Locke sued Eastwood again for attempting to crush her career. Eastwood eventually settled with Locke for an undisclosed amount in 1996. After the settlement, Locke explained why she persevered when many thought she should just quit, telling the LA Times, "Since everything in my life collapsed in '89, I was just determined that I wouldn't cave in. I wouldn't just go away or become a basket case. I knew the value of me as a person." 1997's Trading Favors was the third and final feature film Sondra Locke directed. According to an interview, she hoped to transition from acting to directing as she felt very at home behind the camera, but it just wasn't a future she saw herself in. "I was emotionally devastated from the years of fighting my legal battles, and have become somewhat jaded about the whole Hollywood political game. Also, I realized that all scripts which interested me were not the films the studios wanted to make. My tastes were more geared toward the smaller, independent film." Clint Eastwood's unorthodox directing style is the stuff of Hollywood legend. Locke was not a fan of Eastwood's workmanlike efficiency. She said, "Clint never really gave direction to the actors, certainly not to me. I was very much on my own. I always wondered how much better my performances might have been had I had a director who really worked with me." Locke went on to say that Eastwood doesn't really direct his films, but instead just, quote, shoots a script. She explained, "I would say it's not so much directing as covering the script. By that I mean he will cover a scene with all shots required to know what is going on, but doesn't express an opinion or guide the audience's emotions or eye."